And for your top story this hour, Kremlin spokesperson says Russia is still ready to talk if US responds to its proposal on extending nuclear arms limits. Moscow says it regrets the expiration of the New START treaty, the last remaining nuclear arms pact between Russia and the United States. The New START treaty is a nuclear arms control agreement signed in 2010 that limits how many nuclear warheads, missiles and bombers the US and Russia can deploy. The Kremlin says the end of the agreement leaves the world's two largest nuclear powers without any limits on their arsenals for the first time in more than 50 years. President Vladimir Putin had earlier offered to stick to the treaty's limits for another year if Washington did the same. But the US has not committed, with President Donald Trump pushing for a broader deal that includes China, an idea Beijing has rejected. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says Russia views the treaty's expiration negatively, but will act in a balanced and responsible manner, guided by national interests. We are now being joined by Matthew Verdum. He's an American journalist, joining us from Washington. Thank you so much for joining us here today on NewsX World. Why has Russia conditioned its openness to nuclear arms talks on a specific US response to its proposal to extend the New START limits? And what does this reveal about the current state of strategic trust between Washington and Moscow?
That's quite a question. I think Russia is, doesn't trust the United States, especially because the United States has been so helpful to its enemy that it's waging war against, Ukraine. And Russia wants to make things as difficult as possible. Perhaps they don't want to actually limit nuclear arms proliferation. And so, maybe this is a poison pill designed to prevent the negotiations from actually moving forward.
And how might this expiration affect global nuclear stability? And what role could renewed dialogue play in mitigating those risks?
Well, if the two sides here, being Russia and the United States, are talking, then the possibility of preventing the spread of nuclear weapons beyond those countries that already have them could be prevented. So, there's always a risk involved, and this is an attempt to mitigate that risk. I think that while, the two sides don't agree with each other, probably not a lot of progress is going to be made on limiting nuclear arms or in limiting the arsenals that Russia and the United States have aimed at each other. I don't think that the United States is interested in starting, a nuclear war, pretty obviously. But the United States also does not want to be put at a disadvantage with respect to Russia's nuclear arsenal.
And could linking nuclear arms talks to broader geopolitical issues and disputes such as the war in Ukraine, can this make it harder to achieve substantive progress on arms control?
Yeah, definitely. The fact that they're not, the fact that the two sides are off to a shaky start here in renewing that was a pun, sorry, are off to a shaky start in renewing the treaty, is not, does not bode well for the effort. And but that doesn't mean that it's not going to work out in the end. This is only the beginning of the process, and there's still a lot of time to turn things around.
And obviously, Trump said that he'd like in the new agreement for China to also be included, and China have rejected. Do you think that we're ever going to get to a point where they both agree on a new treaty and sign it, or is Trump going to stand firm on having China in on it as well?
Yeah, I'm not. Well, I think the wild card here are the Chinese. Are the Chinese going to want to limit their nuclear arsenal, their nuclear reach in the world? Um, maybe they'd be interested in that, but I just don't see that happen. China views itself as a rising power. It views itself as the real legitimate superpower in the world, and I don't think that it's going to be easily dissuaded from pursuing its nuclear ambitions.
Thank you, Matthew, but don't go too far as we will be coming back to you a bit later. During a visit to Kyiv, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said that Poland is preparing a new $55.91 million aid package for Ukraine, mainly made up of armed equipment. He has said that Poland could give Ukraine MiG-29 fighter jets at any time, but that Vladimir Zelenskiy had told him Kyiv may need other air defense equipment as a higher priority. He further said that he would discuss this with the Polish officials and get back to the Ukrainian president by Monday. During the meeting between Tusk and Zelensky in Kyiv, the two leaders also signed a letter of intent covering joint defense productions between Poland and Ukraine. Poland has been one of Ukraine's key military and political supporters since Russia's full-scale invasion, providing weapons, training and logistical assistance while advocating for stronger Western backing for Kyiv. We are now being joined again by Matthew. Thank you for joining back. What strategic message does Poland send by stepping up military aid for Ukraine, especially when the war has now was coming up to 4 years and other allies have varying levels of support?
Poland is sending the message that they don't want to give up on Ukraine, that they want Ukraine to continue the fight against aggressive Russia, and they want to keep it going because a lot of Europeans feel, I think justifiably, they feel threatened by Russia's aggressive policy of military expansion, and they feel that if Ukraine falls, if the situation in Ukraine is not rectified, if Ukraine doesn't get its original territory back, that they're next. People are very alarmed in the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, Finland, Germany, not just Poland. People are, government officials and, the people at large are worried about a resurgent Russia coming and threatening their territorial sovereignty. And so they support Ukraine's efforts to fight Russia.
In what ways does Poland's aid package reflect its own security concerns, given its geographical proximity to the war and connections to broader NATO defence planning? As before, we know that some drone attacks have gone into Poland.
That's a difficult question to answer. I think that Poland is doing what it thinks it can, what it thinks is best to support the Ukraine's effort to fight back against Russia. How this reflects on Poland, I'm not really able to say. But I think that Poland thinks that they are legitimately putting forward their best effort to support Ukraine, which they believe has been unfairly attacked by Russia, and they want to fight back.
Thank you, Matthew. Don't go too far, as we will be coming back to you in just a moment. Poland's Justice Minister, Waldemar Żurek, announced that a team of Secret Service officials, prosecutors and police will investigate links between convicted US sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and Poland. This team, formed after the release of millions of documents by the US Justice Department this week, will explore potential Polish connections to Epstein's network, including the involvement of 2 individuals, 1 Polish woman and 1 Polish man, in Epstein's operation. Żurek emphasized that the team would investigate whether there were activities involving Epstein's network in Poland, including the possible presence of Polish victims. The investigation could eventually lead to a formal commission and request for classified US documents. Prime Minister Donald Tusk also announced Poland would examine possible links between Epstein and Russian intelligence, although the Kremlin dismissed the claims. We are now being rejoined by Matthew Vadum. Thank you for rejoining us here. Why is Poland investigating the Epstein files now? And what does this say about how countries are handling this international abuse cases?
I suspect Poland is investigating the Epstein files now because so many international players have been implicated in the latest document dump by the U.S. Department of Justice. Something like 3 million documents, papers, videos, photographs, and so on were released just days ago by the Justice Department. And a lot of people are scrambling to deal with the fallout. You look at Britain, where right now Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government is teetering on the verge of collapse. At least his prime ministership is in jeopardy because he appointed an Epstein friend as ambassador to the United States, and apparently knew at the time that the man was, an Epstein friend. And then look at what's happened to former Prince Andrew there. The way that his titles have been stripped, and he's being evicted from his home by his brother, King Charles. So, there's been a lot of consequences for people who have been tied to Epstein, and I think Poland wants to probably wants to get ahead of the problem and know what it's dealing with. I am not aware of any allegations being made against Polish nationals specifically as a result of the disclosures made in the Epstein files.
And how can Poland investigate safely while protecting victims' privacy and ensuring a fair legal process?
Well, they could do something like what the U.S. did when the U.S. Congress adopted the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and said that while files are being released, they must be reviewed to make sure that they're not identifying victims or potential victims, or people who are, uninvolved, with Epstein, so that people aren't falsely accused of doing things. And so the law states that, the files, that the Justice Department has to go through the files and clear them before they're released. And if you've gone through the files, you'll see there's a lot of photographs, with people's eyes, blacked out in a black box, so you can't identify them. And they've taken efforts to protect identities where possible. Still, a lot of scurrilous allegations are contained in the Epstein files that have been disclosed, and it's probably impossible to guard against releasing them all. So, if Poland tries to be cautious, as the United States Congress was, they may end up not hurting too many innocent people, but some innocent people are probably going to get hurt anyway, especially when there is. I think it's fair to say about the Epstein files that there is widespread public hysteria among people in governments around the world about what it means, or the people in the political base of President Trump want to see the rich and famous brought down by Epstein files disclosures, and they've been baying but for blood for a long time, and without regard to who actually gets hurt by the disclosure of raw police investigative files that really should never have seen the light of day.
Thank you so much, Matthew, for joining us here today on NewsX World.